All right, so let's take you now back to our interview with the political analyst, Dr. Ongama Mtimka. Of course, Dr. Mtimka, this follows the speech by Malema last night, almost 2 hours. And I mean, we've heard, already commentary around it. It was in complete contrast to his rather cordial address that he held last week, where, of course, he was wishing Floyd Shivambu well. What do you make then of this fiery speech that we heard yesterday?
So whenever political events happen, we always have the obligation to interpret them for what they mean for the system. So opposition politics in South Africa have seen a shaking, and we weren't sure after the first press briefing as to whether what one of the options that was being offered in terms of what's happening, the official line from Floyd Shivambu, that this was an exercise in some grand coordination of the left in South Africa. We weren't sure yet as to whether that was the case, or Julius Malema, Floyd was leaving because of some internal strife, or the VBS matter, or the conference politics of the EFF going into its conference later this year. What Julius Malema did yesterday was to help us and narrow down the potential explanation as to what's happening in the EFF to strife. And I'm saying that it's two things that I'm saying. What he did yesterday was to help us to narrow down what are the dynamics that have caused Floyd to leave. One, him speaking of Floyd's departure in the manner that he did, using the language of betrayal, using the language of cowards, suggests that there was disagreement and the fallout that made Floyd to leave. The second issue, him consolidating the powers, and not only that, making a statement like, we want to rid the organization of everything that looks like the former deputy president, is confirming once again that there is strife here. And there's the departure is not some exercise in grand strategy, which is meant to consolidate the left, but an EFF that is facing a critical moment ahead of its third People's Assembly, which is threatening the soul of the party.
And just talking about some of the key breadcrumbs, as it were, that he is leaving us, what does it then say in terms of other party leaders who were not necessarily present during his address? I mean, it does raise a number of questions on whether or not Malema was directly challenging them when he said those who want to leave the party must do so and do so immediately. I'm talking here about the likes of Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi as an example, Veronica Mente, especially ahead of the party's third national conference in December.
So any organization does have factions and alliances which are built around the personalities of particular politicians or their ideological preferences. The EFF was not going to be unique in that. What Julius Malema's lack of tolerance, for me, in him challenging others to leave, is attempting to create, in fact, he may be fomenting the problems by making factions to be bigger than what they should be. It's not a foregone conclusion that the fact that there were people that were supporting Floyd Shivambu, that they themselves had regarded that support to be bigger than their loyalty to the organization. But Malema poking them in the eye in the manner that he did, he's attempting to do that inadvertently. In his mind, he's trying to protect the organization, but he could achieve quite the opposite. People are free in an organization to rally behind particular leaders, as long as that rallying behind those leaders didn't become bigger than the organization itself. But Malema doesn't seem to be making a difference. He seems to be of the view that if there are people who supported the former deputy president and now he's no longer there, necessarily that means those people are no longer loyal to the EFF, which is very destructive to his agenda.
And I want to come back to his leadership style. But when we look at other, utterances that have been made on the sidelines of this resignation, and when we take a closer look at Malema and Shivambu's relationship, I mean, the two had a lot of ties together, as they've on several occasions described their relationship as this brotherhood. I mean, to what extent does the VBS scandal play a part in Shivambu's decision to leave the EFF?
So it's one of the things that I thought while I was still in that mentality that this is possibly some grand strategy. It's one of the things that I thought is a strategy that he's pursuing so that he can deflect attention away from the party. But how aggrieved Julius Malema is about the departure, how he frames it as part of a factional bloc that is pro the former deputy president and is not about the party or its interests or its continued survival, suggests to me that the biggest issue that's driving the departure is no strategic considerations about MK party, no considerations about VBS and deflecting attention, but everything to do with the grievances that are personal between the two of them. And to your point about the brotherliness, it's almost like a duplicitous characterization of the relationship by Julius Malema, because on several instances he's publicly humiliated Floyd Shivambu, and whether it be taking swipes at him and suggestions that he had no right to contest for office, or in reducing him to a position not even that of a deputy president by public behavior and body language. I mean, I have in mind yesterday one of the photos that were going around, videos that were going around, is him pushing Floyd Shivambu's hand away from King Willekaya Dalingebo in some public platform, which people were using to say, this guy has been humiliating Floyd Shivambu. So on one level, he feels betrayed. On another, he thinks that it was okay to humiliate. Yeah. It's typical narcissistic behavior, if you ask me.